Johnny DriveBYE here. I'd like to talk about what's been concerning me for a while, for 3 years probably. I mean, for the past 3 years, I've been on a self-reflecting journey on who I am and why I am who I am. Now, with me, I've always considered myself an atheist. I've probably since I was 5, 6 years old. Maybe for no good reason I considered myself an atheist when I was that age, but I knew what the word was at that age already. I grew up, if you look up the maternal side of my family, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, they were all freethinkers, which they used that label instead of atheist because of the pejorative side of it. I mean, it was used to label people as a bad thing, and that's probably why I'm here right now talking about this subject. I don't think we're defining the word atheist the right way. I know words are fluid, and that's sort of where I've been when I first started looking at the YouTube community. Atheists, they all define it basically. They define it in the sense that atheist means that no gods exist, or a god doesn't exist, and in the broadest sense, that no gods exist. This I think is fundamentally wrong, because atheism is not about whether a god exists. It's about believing in. There's a difference between believe in a God exists and believing in a God or believing a God exists. There's a huge fundamental difference there. What does it mean to believe in a God? Well, I think most of us would probably agree that that has to do with worship. I don't think that your God is worthy of worship, and that's where it is. But the reason that I can say this is my evidence comes from the history of the word. Ironically, atheist was first used to describe Christians that didn't accept the Roman gods. Now, how do you like that, Christians? You're atheists. It was used to, there were Christians that refused to worship the Roman gods of their time. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't believe the Roman gods exist. In fact, if you look in the Bible, you can find plenty of passages in there. No, I shouldn't say plenty. I should say there are passages in the Bible that say that there are other gods, but you should accept the Christian God as the one to worship. And I think that's how the word kind of got conflated with believing that it exists, believing a God exists versus believing in. My argument is that atheist is refusing to worship, or not thinking that worship is worthy of that God. I don't think I'm going to change the world on it, but I really think that I want to get my opinion out there, because I think I have a little bit of knowledge on this, because I've known that word since I was a young kid. I've used it for quite a few years, okay? Well, anyway, let's look at the Stanford encyclopedia as just part of the definition. I'll leave a link in the description here to the Stanford definition on atheism and agnosticism. But in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they write, atheism is typically defined in terms of theism. Theism, in turn, is best understood as a proposition, something that is either true or false. It is often defined as the belief that God exists, but here, Belief means something believed. It refers to the propositional content of belief, not to the attitude or psychological state of believing. This is why it makes sense to say that theism is true or false, and to argue for or against theism. If, however, remember that word, if, however, atheism is defined in terms of theism, and theism is the proposition that God exists, and not the psychological condition of believing that there is a God, then it follows that atheism is not the absence of the psychological condition of believing that God exists. More on this below. I'm not going to read that. But the A in atheism must be understood as negation instead of absence, not instead of without. Therefore, in philosophy at least, atheism should be construed as the proposition that God does not exist, or more broadly, the proposition that there are no gods. That is where I have a problem with it. Because if we look at the etymology of the word atheism, well, first of all, they're saying that theism was around first, which is not true. Atheist was coined before the word theist. Why is that? Why do I say that? Well, if you look at the history, atheist was first used by the Roman Empire to describe Christians. Ironically, Christians were called atheists because they refused to worship the Roman gods. Not that they didn't believe that the Roman gods existed. So there's my argument there. Which, it's not about existing. They very well could have believed that the Roman gods existed, but they believed that Yahweh, or their God, the Christian God, was more powerful. So atheist was first used to describe the Christians. Later on, when Christianity became the dominant faith or religion, atheist was then used to describe people that didn't accept the Christian God, because the Christian God became part of the Roman gods, basically. But 100 years later is when theist was used to oppose atheist. And that's where Stanford gets it wrong again, because it is the theist is an opposition to atheist, which is strange, I understand, but that's the way the word worked, because, let's put it this way, back then it was normal. There was no need for a word theist. Atheist became first because, well, it just was. and I guess you can argue that it's still the opposition to theist, but it's, the history doesn't show that. It shows that theist was created to the opposition, or to show what someone that does worship, which was a normal thing. So there was no need for the word theist, you know. I can't even think of an example, because atheist is a unique word. But after Christianity became the dominant faith, then atheist sort of became, I guess eventually became the no gods thing, but it really doesn't, the meaning of it is not about whether God exists or not. I mean, the actual origin of the meaning of the word is not about the existence. Not necessarily, anyway. I mean, I can be an atheist and still think that those gods exist, but I just refuse to worship those gods. And I think this is the fundamental mistake that everybody's making on this word. I don't think I'm going to change the world or anything, because I think the word has already been ingrained in so many different ways, and it's already been used in so many different ways now that it can't. But I think we're all taking this argument on authority. I think all of us are. I did too. I'm still not even really sure, and one of the reasons that I'm making this video now is because I want to get more feedback on it. I'd like to get more people doing research on it and finding out what the actual history of the word is. I like to know what's true. I like to find out as many true things as possible. There's a Dillahunty kind of a thing for you. But if anybody sees this, leave your comments. I'd love to hear what you think about this. Like this and share it if you think it's worthy of it. I mean, I'll share it anyway. I'd like to hear opposition to it too. I really want to know what everybody thinks about this. This is a little bit more serious of a video. I'm a joker usually, but this one is serious. I really want to know what everybody thinks about this. I hope you're all having a fantastic day anyway. Later.